This game was played between Tal and Karpov in Brussels in 1987. This is a blitz game which displays a king attacked by Tal, and it begins with the Caro-Kann defence. Tal here plays c4, which is a line in the Caro-Kann which may transpose into a similar line to that of the Queen's Gambit. Karpov plays d5. We now have pawn exchanges in the centre. At this point, Tal plays c takes d5. If, on the other hand, White had played d4, then the opening becomes a form of the Queen's Gambit, but where White is missing the e-pawn and Black is missing the c-pawn. However, returning to the game itself, at this point, White plays c takes d5, Black continues knight f6, then knight c3. Black then captures the White d5 pawn, and we now have material equality between the two sides. The game continues knight f3, then we have an exchange of knights. Karpov then plays g6, which prepares the fianchetto of the Black King's bishop. Tal then plays d4 and advances his centre pawn and blocks the line of action of the Black bishop, which is to be placed on g7. Black plays bishop to g7. Tal plays bishop to d3 and develops this bishop, which aims at the Black King side. Both players then castle king side. We then have knight to c6. White plays rook to e1, which moves the rook to the semi-open file. Karpov plays rook to e8 and counterbalances the previous rook move by White with a similar rook move to the e file. Tal then plays bishop to g5, which puts pressure on the Black e7 pawn. Karpov then plays bishop to e6. This is played to block the line of action of the White rook on e1, as well as to develop this bishop. And at this point, Tal decides to sacrifice the exchange with rook takes e6 in order to weaken the pawns protecting the Black castled king. Going back half a move, an alternative for White in this position is to play rook to b1. However, as we have said, Tal plays rook takes e6 in this position. Black captures the rook. White then plays bishop to c4. This is one point of the exchange sacrifice. The double pawns on the e file are attacked. Black then plays queen to d6. The queen defends the e6 pawn, which is pinned to the Black king. Tal then plays queen to e2. The White queen and the bishop on c4 attack the Black e6 pawn. Black then plays knight to d8. This awkward knight move is the only way Black can defend the e6 pawn by a second piece. White then plays rook to e1. The pawn on e6 is the focus of the Black and White pieces. Karpov then plays rook to c8. Black can do little more to defend the e6 pawn, therefore Black develops this rook to the semi-open file. White plays knight to d2, and this knight is heading to e4. Karpov then plays king to h8, which unpins the e6 pawn. Tal plays knight to e4, which threatens the Black queen. Black retreats the queen to c7 and threatens to capture the bishop on c4. White retreats the threatened bishop to b3. Karpov then advances the weak e6 pawn to e5 with a view to exchanging this for the White d4 pawn. Tal then plays h4. This is sharp play by Tal with a pawn attack against the castle Black king. Tal has already sacrificed the exchange to weaken the Black castle king position and now directly pursues the attack against the Black king. Going back half a move, instead of h4, White could simply have played the pawn advance d5 at this point. However, as we have said, Tal plays h4 in this position. Karpov then plays e takes d4, but going back half a move, in order to restrain White's kingside attack, it might be better to play first h6, and then we have bishop e3, and then play the move e takes d4, and we could have c takes d4, rook to f8, and if White then decided to play h5, Black could simply play g5, and Black is safe. Returning to the game itself at this point, as we've said, Black played e takes d4, Tal then plays h5. This is a natural consequence of the previous pawn advance h4. Karpov then played g takes h5 in this point, but this is a tactical mistake by Karpov. Going back half a move, a safe move for black in this position is queen to b6, then we can have bishop to a4, rook to f8, bishop takes e7 with approximate equality. But returning to the game, as we've said, in this position Karpov played g takes h5 and Tal plays queen takes h5, but Tal fails to take advantage of the previous inaccurate move by Karpov. Going back half a move, white should play in this position knight to f6, and as this move wins the game. If, for example, we have knight to f7 and we have knight takes f8, rook takes e8, bishop takes f7, and white wins. However, as we have said, Tal plays queen takes h5 at this point. Black plays rook to f8 and displaces the threatened rook. The position is about level as white's kingside attack has momentarily ceased. Tal then plays bishop to c2 and is aiming at a mate threat on h7. Karpov then plays queen to e5, which moves the queen to the defense of the black king. Tal plays knight to g3 and white has an evident mate threat on h7. Karpov captures the rook on e1 with check, and Tal then plays king to h2. In fact, Tal has no alternative except king to h2 at this point, for if white plays knight to f1, then after queen takes f2 check, black has a forced mate, as can be checked. However, returning to the game itself, white has played king to h2. Karpov then played h6, but this loses the upper hand to white. A better move at this point is bishop to h6, and then we could have bishop takes h6, rook to f7, bishop takes h7, rook to c6, and white with a material deficit must be content with a draw by perpetual check. Returning to this move, bishop to h6, after white plays bishop takes h6, note that queen takes c3 in this position is a mistake, as it allows white to checkmate in the following attractive way. We have bishop to g7 check, king takes g7, queen takes h7 check, king to f6, queen to f5 check, king to g7, queen to g6 check, king to h8, queen to h7 checkmate. But returning to the game itself, where Karpov has played h6 in this position, Tal then plays bishop takes h6. Karpov then displaces the king, but this move loses rapidly. Tal plays bishop takes g7. Karpov then plays rook takes f2. After this move, white has a forced mate in the most three moves. Nevertheless, black's game is lost as white's king attack is irresistible. Tal then continues queen to h7 check, king to f7, queen to g6 check, king to g8, bishop to h6 check, and at this point Karpov resigned, because we would then have king to h8, queen to g7 checkmate.